All right, welcome back, everybody. It's been a few weeks since we've seen you. Welcome to Coffee with Coaches. Loretta and I are actually recording a little bit later in the afternoon, so I have some water, but that's fine. We're still gonna get all the info out on Coffee with Coaches here today. And Coach Loretta just finished an amazing FKT across the entire state of Michigan. So we're going to dive into all things that she encountered while she was out on the trails, how she prepared, what went into logistically planning for such a big event. Coach Loretta, welcome to welcome to being a guest to our podcast.
Yay! I like this. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the show.
Well, first of all, congratulations. It was fun following along and watching your journey and seeing everybody that was involved. Just a couple quick things. Like you made this a community event. You had a lot of people meet you out on the trails. You were very vocal and very expressive about where you were going to be going, what you were going to be doing, what times you wanted to shoot for. So I'm really excited to dive into all of that. But let's start with how you're feeling today, being only a few days removed from your effort.
Yeah, actually, I finished at 11 p.m. on Monday and today's Thursday. I feel really good. I mean, actually, unbelievably good compared to what I thought I might feel like. I have
Yeah.
pretty good energy. My body pretty much went unscathed, which is, I think, huge when you think about tackling 200, almost 220 miles in a few days. So I feel really good. I'm not sure the whole idea of what I just did, my accomplishment, I'm not sure it's sunk in quite yet. I mean, I get it, but I haven't really grasped it all yet.
I could imagine because after a 100-mile race, I feel like it takes me like a few weeks to like be so far away from the event itself that I can see all of the learning opportunities that are sprinkled throughout the day. So I could imagine it gets magnified as you go a few days, as like you have to go and unpack so much more. Um, so if you could remind us all, like, what was the route? How far did you go? Tell us how long it took you. What are the details? Give us some of the quick stats.
Sure. So I started in South Haven, Michigan, and I ran what's called the Great Lake to Lake Trail primarily for the entire route. It's not a complete trail, so there's road connections along the way. And I finished at Champaign Park in St. Clair Shores. My GPS totaled 219.49 miles, and I did it in 3 days, 15 hours, and 14 minutes.
And so you're connecting like lake to lake. You're going
Yep,
from water on one end to water on the other end.
correct.
And I
Yep.
saw a really awesome finishing video of you and the community around you. So can you describe like everybody that was there for you at the finish and everybody that helped make this possible too?
Right. So that was really pretty incredible. So when you get to the very end of this route, the last route is on uh 12-mile road, which is a really long road, and you're on sidewalk until you get to the lake. And when I first got to that spot, I was like, oh, I'm on the last road, no more turns, straight there. And then it's like, I don't know, close to 40 miles of that. And so then it like hits you that you're on the last road, but you have 40 miles. So it was a long, long time. And so I didn't expect to have anybody at the finish because it's Monday night. It's, going to be a late finish. I can't even tell you what time I'm going to finish because, I have quite a few miles left. And I had had pacers always along the way. But when I got to 10 miles left, a group of my friends that I typically run with all showed up. And that was incredible. It turned it into like a Saturday morning long run, right? With all the people that I typically run with. And then Dr. Liesel and her mom shows up in her minivan playing Spice Girls and honking the horn and her mom shaking the cowbell. It was just brought it so you could actually like get all this excitement to get yourself to the finish, right? Because I have this little crowd, and my husband is been crewing me the whole time, but he's getting into it. There's loud music. That's a Michigan fight song going on. My friend Jeff came back, who had ran like a marathon worth earlier in the day, came back to see the finish and cheer me on. So it was just really cool. And then along the way, oh, it was in Berkeley, so a little ways out from there, I met my nephew, and he joined me on the bike for a couple of miles, and then he drove to Champagne Park to follow the finish. So he's honking, and then his father-in-law is from the area, so he jumps in. So I have this little entourage of people cheering. I'm surprised the police weren't called because it was kind of late, but it was incredible. Like I just had my own party going on. Music was playing, it was unbelievable that the running community came together for me for my finish, to be there for the celebration.
That sounds amazing, and I'd hate to skip right to the end right away, but I wanted to touch on that because that was something that stood out to me was you hear a lot of these FKTs, it's like you finish and it's just you and it's so personal, and I feel like it was just a great embodiment of how much this route means to you to go across your state that you love, to connect these 2 points. You've been thinking about it for a while, and then to see everybody that shows up for you at the end is just like a fantastic way. And of course, we do these things for us. We do it for the journey, we do it for the experience. But when you can get everybody hooting and hollering and getting the cowbell and really solidifying that multi-day journey, I bet it felt incredible.
It did. And
But
miles go a little faster towards the end. I
yeah, I
know that
bet.
when the group started, I heard somebody say, we just went 4 minutes a mile pace faster now that we have a crowd. It just really brought energy to me because I was tired.
hmm So let's back up now. Let's start at the beginning of the day. So I remember seeing the initial Instagram post where you initially said, "Hi, I'm Loretta. I'm going to be running across Michigan." You click your watch, and the ocean is in the background, or not the ocean, excuse me, the lake is in the background. It's sunrise, and you take off. What happened after that? Take us through the journey.
Okay. So it was amazing. It was a beautiful morning on Lake Michigan. We had spent the night in the van right at the start of the run. And when I first got out of the car, it was kind of windy. So I was like, ooh, this might be kind of chilly, but it warmed up pretty fast. I sort of wanted to start the beginning by myself. I mean, I welcomed anybody that wanted to join me, but I sort of wanted to just take the first couple of hours just to kind of settle in, make sure I wasn't going out too fast, not having ever tackled that much distance in that amount of time. I was trying to be really cautious. And so I'm very familiar with the Calhaven Trail, so I just needed to navigate, use my watch and navigated to the trailhead, which was probably about a mile and a half from the lighthouse where I started, and got onto the Calhaven. Now I'm used to running the Calhaven east to west, not west to east, so there is a little bit more elevation going the opposite way. But the wind was to my back, which was perfect. I ran the first couple of miles or a couple of hours all by myself, and I just felt really good about it. I just never went in with any anxiety. I just felt like I could finish this. I was never worried about it. And my goal was to really enjoy the experience more than anything, just to get to the other side. But it wasn't, no, it's so much about speed. It was more about just enjoying it. And that's why I kind of told anybody that was helping me, like, I want to enjoy it. I want to take pictures. I want to have fun with it, and make it, a really great journey. So that was the beginning. My husband, Derek, and then my friend Kim were my crew. And so Kim was there to help transport people because, there's a lot of logistics involved when you don't have race support, right? So she was helping whoever was running with me. They would figure out where they thought that they would end with me, and they would park there, and then she'd drop them off to me, and they'd run to their car. But I had some people signed up for like 9 hours of pacing. So that was a lot of logistics trying to figure out, okay, how fast is she moving? She's slowing down. Where do we need to, put this next car? And so that was a lot of work. They met me probably about every hour just to provide any kind of support that I needed. I had a vest, and I could have gone longer by myself, but they also enjoyed cheering me on every hour, and which was kind of nice to kind of, you know, getting me back up there. But probably early on, I started eating. I had a terrible diet on the way, Reese, but I started off with sausage egg McMuffin from McDonald's and a Coke. And that kind of that was a big source of fuel most of my run. I just wanted greasy and salty stuff, is what I seemed to keep ordering. But then about 2.5 hours in, one of my athletes, Lindsay, who had never met in person, she lives in the Kalamazoo area. She ran with me for a couple of hours, which was super cool. Got to meet her in person. We got to, share a lot of miles and chatting. And then when she left, I ran probably the next hour by myself, and that took me to the Calhaven State trailhead, and that's where the race, Calhaven Ultra, starts. So it was kind of just a moment. a good moment for me because I knew that section really well. And it was good to say, okay, here I am. I've now completed the marathon distance. I'm past the 50K distance, coming in around maybe 36 miles when I came in at that point. So at that point, I was like, okay, I think I need to take a little more time because I'd just been kind of running by aid, not really taking much time. But I'm like, I need to take a little time, get some chicken noodle soup because I had prepared that the day before, and get myself going, and some chocolate milk. And that was a good time to like a little bit reset, right? And then at that point, I was headed towards Kalamazoo. So Derek jumped on the bike with me and helped me navigate the Kalamazoo River Trail through downtown Kalamazoo. And then he rode about 12 miles with me. And then my next pacer joined me at almost 50 miles. I think I was a couple miles short of 50 when he joined me near Galesburg. And he's somebody that was an acquaintance. I had met him at Javelina, but he's friends with another one of my friends. And the night before, he's like, "Hey, I want to help you with your FKT." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so perfect," because he took the dark hours, leading up to 10 p.m. on Friday, which was really nice because I was a little concerned about going through those, and there's some road sections that I didn't really want to be alone on in the dark. And so yeah, so he started around probably 4 p.m. So that took me through till about 10. Him and I ran from Galesburg to about Battle Creek. All that time I was moving pretty well. He took me through 50 miles to 100K, moving well, probably in the 10-minute pace range, I would say. And just uh, fueling. Around that time too, my friend brought some chicken nuggets and fries, which was a good little bonus too. So then after that, around 10 p.m., or maybe a little earlier, my friend Christine met us in Battle Creek, and Fred decided to continue along. That got into a little bit of a dicey road section that was under construction, and it was dark, and there were, cones all over. I didn't even know quite where cars were supposed to go. So my friend Christine, amazing. She's got her Knox gear on that's blinking and her hand out to make sure traffic doesn't hit us. And that seemed like a section it didn't seem like we would ever get through just because it was not the most enjoyable, going along there. And then my goal going into this, I've said this before on the podcast, like I always want to hit 50 miles feeling fresh, but this goal was different. I wanted to hit 100 miles feeling fresh because I had another 100 plus to go. And so that's why I was being really conservative on my pace just to be sure I was okay for the rest of the journey. So I would say I came into Marshall, Michigan around 81 miles, and I felt so fresh at 81 miles. I grabbed some chicken noodle soup and some chocolate milk, and I take off for Albion was my next stop. Well, in hindsight, I probably should have stopped in Marshall because I felt so good, but I was kind of wanting to get 100 before I don't know why. I had it in my head I wanted to get it to 100 before I stopped, but it was getting cold, and I got on some back rolling hills, and I was not moving as well, and I think I was feeling fatigued, maybe not enough fuel at that point, and I came into Albion at about 91 miles, and I was just like, I'm done for today. Like it was 3 a.m. I had started at 7:45. I'd been going for quite a long time, and if I just had 100, of course I would have kept going, but I had 100 and 20 more to go. So I decided to take a pause, and my friend's like, let's put away the numbers. That's, the hundred's not important. Let's just, get you some rest and get going, and take advantage of the coldest time of the day while you sleep. So that was good advice. My friend says I had a little bit of a panic attack because I didn't know what to do with my watch, and they were going to move me in the van to sleep. And I apparently, I don't remember saying this, said that I wouldn't be able to move. I'd have to stay right there because my watch was on. I was a little tired, but we ended up sleeping for a few hours that night. And I used a technology called PEMF, which is a magnetic current, to help me to recover during the night and give me some energy. And I just slept with that. And then I woke up in the morning, and I was a little sad because one of the niggles I've been dealing with for a couple years was there. I couldn't step on my heel. And I thought that was my only doubt through the entire journey when I got up that morning and couldn't step on my heel. And I thought, is this journey over, right? But I recently have got a new sponsorship Microsport Pro, and I had that on hand. It's a microcurrent machine, and I ran some programs, and they resolved. I got a later start than I wanted to that morning, but I was able to step on my heel. The self-care was worth the time. I knew that even though I didn't want to be taking that time, I had to if I wanted to continue on. So, but the thing was, all along, friends and family had a tracker on me, called Life 360, so they could follow, where I was across the state. And no one told my next pacer, Russ, that I was pausing for a bit. So he shows up at 7:30, and we didn't get out there till like 10:30 because I couldn't move yet. But once we got going, we were in Albion, and we had some little trouble with navigation through Albion getting us to Victory Park. We made a few wrong turns. What I found is in the city where there was a trail along, sometimes it was a little hard to figure out where you're supposed to, what streets and stuff you're supposed to turn down because they were parallel to each other, and it got a little
Mm.
mixed up. So got some bonus miles there. And headed out of Albion and towards Concord. It was also back roads with a lot of rolling hills. I chose to walk the hills because I just decided I needed to save my legs for lots more miles ahead of me. Somewhere in between that route, one of the athletes I've coached for a few years, Des, she came and joined me. Then I had my friend Russ and Des. And what was really cool is, so we didn't ever plan to have more than one person at a time, but sometimes people overlapped because some people just didn't want to leave. I guess it's just too cool to be around. They just wanted to do more miles. And Des, came with a whole new set of energy. And that's what would happen is, I'd get a new person and a whole new set of energy and just kind of kept me moving, along. So that was cool. After I got to Concord, which is on the Falling Waters Trail, uh, Barb and Randy, friends of mine, and I coached Barb. I had actually helped crew and pace Randy at Cocodona, came to crew and pace me, which was, they made a long travels to be there to help me, which was super cool. So got to see them. That kind of gave me more excitement. Russ left. Barb and Des paced me for a little while, and then there was just Des. Well, somewhere in there, it was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. All of a sudden, it hit me like, I need a nap. I'm so tired. I don't really want to sleep right now because it's daylight, but I just can't move anymore. And so we decided it was probably best for me to just kind of rest for a little bit, reset. It was probably a good decision, except, it did take some time. And this time before, had been taking some Tylenol just to keep myself on, and I had missed it the time before. That probably hurt me a little bit because we had all forgotten. But went in the van, which the van was super helpful all along because it was my mobile station, right? I could go to the bathroom, I could sleep, I could eat, and it was always not very far away. So went in, napped, ran some microsport current on me to kind of get myself ready to go again. Fueled up, took some Tylenol, and man, that made me a new woman. I was running quickly on the trail again. So I'm like, okay, this is better because I was down to a crawl. Now I'm back running and moving well. So then Barb ended up joining me on the Falling Waters Trail and took me to Jackson, where we met her husband Randy, and Randy navigated me through Jackson. So we got to a point, the Jackson prison, and there is a lot of property that's all Jackson Prison. So it's lined with signs like no trespassing, Jackson Prison. And it felt like it went on forever. And at that point, I had to go to the bathroom really bad. So it was a long stretch of, I can't quite run now because I need to go to the bathroom. And so I got through there, and got to the van, and Derek was concerned that I was moving too slow because we had already talked about we're not going to get into the point of the night before I went too long. I need to stop sooner because it just made more sense to get some rest and then go. Maybe I stopped a little too soon that day. I only, because I had a late start and then I ended up having a early stop. I only had like 35 miles on Saturday, which in my mind kind of hurt me a little bit because I wanted to be way ahead of that at that point. But maybe the rest was best, who I'm not really sure. So we stayed the night that night, and got up. I woke up a few hours later, getting ready to go, but decided I should run a few more microcurrent programs just to get myself ready to go. And then it was downpouring, And so I reached out to my next pacer, Jess, and it's like, you know what? I'm going to wait out this rain. I'm not going to go out in the, because it was probably 40, 30 or 40 degrees. And I'm like, I'm not going to go out and get cold right now. I've got a long day ahead of me. So we waited it out. Again, I started on my own that morning, which I kind of wanted to just because starting the next morning, you're a little creaky and it's nice to be able to work out the creaks before you have a pacer and, feel like you're slowing somebody else down. I know they're there for me, but, it still feels like that. So we headed towards the Lakeland Trail, and I probably ran maybe a couple miles before I got to her. And when I got to her, of course, there was more sausage egg McMuffin waiting for me and a Coke. And we got onto the Lakeland Trail in Stockbridge, and that was like, wow, I'm on my home turf. This is my trail that I run all the time. I already have a couple FKTs on that trail. So from Stockbridge to Hamburg, which was 21 miles, I have that FKT, and then my friend Christine and I have the out and back 42 miles on there. So very familiar. And I was really excited about it because, thinking about this journey the whole time, I could always visualize when I hit that trail and, all the sections because I know it by heart because I'm on it all the time. So that was exciting. And so I felt like the miles were going by pretty quick because I was comfortable with the area. And we got almost to Stockbridge, and I saw another runner coming our way. And I'm like, oh, is that another runner? And Jess is like, yeah. I'm like, I think we know that runner. It's Bjorn. And so it was our another friend that we didn't know he was coming. He was supposed to do some earlier night hours. And since I slept, we didn't end up having him come. So he needed a run, and he's like, had been tracking. He's like, oh, that's not too far away. I'm going to go catch them, which was really cool because yet another new energy, something unexpected. So he ran us into Stockbridge, and then we went on to Gregory, the three of us together, which was great. Got to Gregory, and my friend Claudia joined in. So at that point, Jess dropped out. Bjorn and Claudia took me to Pinckney. At this point during the trail, I did some run walk, like the 3-minute run, 1-minute walk, just to get me through because it's a really flat trail, and thought it was probably a good idea to just kind of conserve a little bit for the next day is ahead or whatever. So that's what we did. And as we neared Pinckney, things went pretty good. Got into the depot in Pinckney, which is a popular place we always meet for runs. And our friends Kurt and Leslie and their dog Clementine came. So there was another big party. Clementine was all wild. Everybody was having fun. Clementine didn't quite know what was going on, why everybody was cheering, but that was fun. And then went on to headed towards Zuki Lake Tavern, which is also another popular spot in our area. And at that point, my friend Kay joined in somewhere in there, bringing some chicken nuggets and some French fries, and that was great. But when I got close to Zuki Lake, all of a sudden I started noticing some tendon issue in my left foot. I could just feel it nodding a little bit. So I'm like, okay, I need to address this before this becomes a problem for me. So we phoned Liesel and got some remote tips from our PT of like what to do. So my pacers quickly taped me up with some KT tape and got me going. But then as I neared the next big spot, which would be Hamburg, my right foot started to bug me a little bit. So my friend Kay called in Liesel and said, can you actually come in and do your magic? So got to Hamburg, and again, a big party. We had Kurt and Leslie, and then my pacers that were with me, and then Liesel showed up. She did some work on me, got me going. We thought we were really good. If anybody sees the pictures, I was actually able to. There's a story walk there, and there's a big cement block. I was able to climb up on top of there, get down from there. I was pretty proud of myself that I had some moves still at that time of the day. I'm showing Lisa I can stand on one foot, I can squat to the ground, like I have some good mobility. Anyway, so we left and we were headed towards Island Lake, and I started having more pain in each of my tendons to the point that I was having trouble walking. It was pretty painful. So my friend Kay and I decided to hook up the microcurrent and run with it. Well, that's a little tricky. There's wires. So funny story. We're like going along. She hooks, I take my pants down. We put the wire down my pants. We KT tape it all up, start running. And I'm like, Oh my gosh. It was actually the current was had come apart and it was like biting me. I'm like, we've got to stop here. I got to get this off. So we're on this like main road, but it's dark and I'm pulling my pants down right on the trail to get these wires because they're biting me. Oh, that was kind of funny because we're like both trying to help each other. We have our headlamps on and we're like blinding each other, trying to fix our situation. But got that fixed and I wore those for a little bit to just try to get it going. But I realized that I couldn't run at that point because it was so painful. I just was going to walk and I knew I had about 60 miles left. Although I wanted to finish so badly on Sunday, I knew it was time. I'm like, and I had Kay call Liesel just to make sure I was thinking right. I'm like, I don't want to finish this walking. I know I have run in me. I just need to fix this, and maybe if I rest my tendons a little bit, I can pop back up and get going. And Liesel agreed, and so we decided we were very, very close to home and made a very hard call to come home for the night. I wasn't sure I wanted to come to my house because I was afraid it would be really hard to get out the next morning, but I wanted to be able to soak in an Epsom salt bath and try to, perk things back up. So that's what I did. And I used the PEMF. And the next morning, I was feeling really good. So it was like, time to go again. I started where I had left off, partway to Island Lake, and my friend Jeff had parked near Island Lake, so he ran towards me. So I probably ran a couple miles by myself, and then he joined me. And we went through Island Lake. Things were going great again. Probably midway through Island Lake, I noticed my left leg perfectly fine. Never heard from that leg again. But my right leg started, or like tendon area started bothering me. And so I reached out to Liesel again. I mean, I probably wouldn't have made it through without her. She was giving us some really great support, and the same way with the microcurrent. And my heel was all swollen. I sent her a picture. I'm like, I have a cankle. Like, she's like, "Ooh, that's sexy." I'm like, well, what should I do about this cankle? So we did some troubleshooting. I used some KT tape for a while, and that was helpful. I used some CBD salve from my massage place, Tricovery. Those things were helping, but, it was still painful. Started, getting on more of a regimen of pain medication like Tylenol to try to, just kind of get through because now I'm down to 50 some miles. I'm going to finish today. No matter what, I'm finishing before midnight is like what I'm telling my crew. Do not let me not finish tonight before midnight. So everybody's like, okay, we've got this. So fixed it up, got going. Things were going great. Came into probably the next big stop would be Wixom. And all of a sudden I hear somebody on a bike saying, keep swimming, keep swimming, keep swimming. I'm like, who is this crazy person? And I look over and it's our friend Kurt. So he had ridden 20 miles to catch us on the bike, because he's following us on the tracker. He's like, had went for a run. He says I inspired him to go for a bike. And I'm like, well, if I can inspire one person to do something physically active today, I'll take that. And so he rode with us and brought us into Wixom. And in Wixom, I had ordered uh, my request was macaroni and cheese and a smoothie. Oh my gosh, that gave me a big burst of energy, and I was able to keep moving a lot faster. And what I realized at this point was I was better off running than walking. So I pretty much ran most of the rest of the way in the last 50 miles because walking was more painful. And I was telling myself in my head, I'm like, why are you walking anyway? What's the reason you need to walk? There's no reason. You're fine. It's more mental at that point, just feeling a little bit fatigued. And then I'm like, well, probably the reason I'm walking at any point is because I need more food. I felt like at this point of the time, I was sort of like a toddler. I was very demanding of food, water, and going to the bathroom. Like when I needed it now, not in a minute, but right now. I'm sure my
Yeah.
crew probably felt that, but it was just like, I don't know if it's just, you get to this point where you're so fatigued and you're, sensory overload and you can't feel the pressure of needing to go to the bathroom and you can't fit, if you're hungry, you're going to just fall over and go to sleep. So you got to just keep it all, going in. And so that got me going, went really well. Came through Novi. And then I think just a little past Novi, I started having some pretty bad discomfort in my tendon again. And I think it was just because my Tylenol had ran out. So we realized, okay, we're going to have to just keep up with this and not let it get to the point of running out because it's painful. So we did that. And then, like I said earlier, we got to Berkeley. which my nephew, lives there. So he joined me on his bike, and then the rest of the journey was on to Champagne Park. So that was a whole lot of talking. What questions do you have?
That yeah, a lot actually. No, it's really great to get like this picture, especially for other people that are looking to like replicate the FKT, go for the FKT to get this picture of like what happened when and what you experienced. That's great. And I think, some of the tidbits that I took away are like if the route goes past your house, like use all opportunities that you can to recover as well as you can. Because in a couple day effort, like recovery is the most important part. You touched on that with the PEMF, which is again, like you said, just this electrical current that you put across your body while you're sleeping to help aid in recovery. So I think using like any technology that you have. One thing that we didn't get into or you didn't mention was the Theragun, which I know you're a huge fan of. I don't know if there's any Theragun action in there.
Nope, no
But
Theragun. No Theragun this time. The
wow.
Wave tool came out, but no Theragun.
Yeah, but so like any tools that we have, like we like, can benefit, especially if you have crew as kind as Derek to follow along the entire time and tend to your every need to have those tools on hand in case you do need them, which is great. Something that I want to kind of go back towards is all the way at the start of the race. I think pacing a multi-day effort is really interesting. And you and I always talk behind the scenes. And, one thing that I mentioned a while ago when we were talking about this is like a lot of people, when they start multi-day efforts, is they click their watch and then boom, they run off. And
Hmm.
then you always see them at the very end, it's just like shuffling in, whether they like set the FKT or not, or reach their goal or not. So we had this talk about like, yeah, I mean, like, I think a lot of people would be better off starting even slower because it's hard
Hmm.
to conceptualize how we're going to feel like 2 or 3 days into the future especially when it's your first multi-day effort like that. Like, I've never done that. I don't know how my body's going to react after,
Right.
17 hours of running, which is about my furthest in time, or I guess my longest in time. But how did you think about pacing?
Hmm.
You said that you were clicking off tens and they felt pretty good,
Yep.
but
Yep.
what were you shooting for and how did you even come around to that number?
Right, right. So I went back and forth with strategy. I knew I needed to be really careful on Calhaven because I was so familiar with it. I've raced that course and I didn't want to get into race mode, because that would have been detrimental. And so probably on a race day, I would be running like sub eights, something like that for the 34 miles there. So I was knew I couldn't get into that. And so my plan was to stick around 10 minutes but not to feel bad when I wanted to pause and take a picture, or if I needed to fuel every 30 minutes, I would take a few walking steps just, to get my fueling in, give myself a break from running, and then run again. I think I just tried to really take the pressure off of myself as far as, sure, I wanted to get under the record, but I also wanted to be able to take care of myself as I needed to so I could get to the other end. And I said that was something that's way different than I would have approached 100. I took the time when something started to bug, I addressed it right away. When I felt like I needed to change my clothes because they were, wet or whatever, I changed my clothes. I normally wouldn't take that kind of time. At 8, I would normally stay in the same outfit and go for the day. So those were things that I just kind of gave myself permission. You need this. Take care of yourself now because it's going to help you in the future. Same way with the sleep. Like, okay, even though I don't really want to sleep right now, I need this so I can, keep going on. So I think that's a little bit different mindset. I originally had considered doing a 3-1 walk from the start, but I knew that that wasn't something I was going to be able to do in the beginning. I just felt like that I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. And so I actually had a conversation with Coach Katie, who's done some 200s, and we talked about that too. My concern was doing 3-1 is that I would hold too fast of a pace because of the minute break, and I just didn't want to get myself into trouble with that. So I just decided instead, like, just go out there all day, move your leg pace, and and that's what I did. I held probably 10 to 10:30 pace all, for the first 90 some miles or whatever, moving pace. And then the next day, I reassessed a little bit and there were hills. So now I changed my strategy because 3-1 isn't great when there's a lot of hills because, it might and fall in a hill time. So we just worked, and I had a really great pacer. Russ was really good about helping me, make sure I'm walking the hills and, taking it easy. And there were even some downhills that I needed to walk just because I needed to save my quads because there were some steeper downhills. So I kind of just let the terrain lead me until I got back to the flat trail. And then I'm like, okay, let's try this, 3-1 for a little bit. So that was kind of mixed in. I kind of just let my body decide, like, okay, I think this is kind of where I'm at and this is what I can do. And like I said, the body decided the last 50 miles you're going to run instead of walk.
Wow. Yeah. And I think too that self-care piece that you mentioned is huge. I think self-care kind of wraps into like being honest with ourselves at the start of like what is all day pace.
Hmm.
And like I'm sure that you had thoughts in your head of like, okay, like if I can do X moving pace at this 100-mile race, like how much gas did I have in the tank? Do I feel like I should be anywhere around that effort or that pace? Just to kind of give you this idea of like, am I at 100-mile like RPE?
Right, right,
Does my
right.
body feel, because I'd imagine you try to mentally think like, okay, is this how I typically feel after 25 miles in a 100-mile race? And
Hmm.
of course, you don't want to feel anywhere near,
Right, exactly.
25 miles in a 100. So you try to like put it into relative context compared to what you have ahead of you.
Right,
So I'm sure that played into a little bit of like your
sure.
strategy and everything. But that effort or that self-care piece of taking the time, and that's something that I personally take away from this is it's really easy in like a 32 mile or a 50 mile or a 100K to think like, oh, there's a little bit of a pebble in my shoe, like maybe I'll just like let it ride for a little while and like deal with the blister later, or maybe I'm a little bit hot right now, but you know what, it's going to cool off in 2 or 3 hours, maybe I won't stop and shed layers. But
Yep.
when you're doing an FKT like this, you're doing such a long effort, like those 1 or 2 hours where you're not at your optimum
Right.
really stack up and then can bite you later in the end.
I think so too. Yeah, that's why I was like so quick to address things, even though knowing, okay, I'm wasting a little bit of time here, but I think I'm wasting this time here. It's going to save me later down the road if I address it right now. And so that was, kind of my motto of the day is just making sure to take care of myself and keep myself going. So for sure. And then, I would look occasionally at my heart rate just to kind of do a little check. And most of the time that first day when I would look, I was like under 120. So I felt pretty good about my pace. I'm like running 118, 117. That's a pretty low heart rate for me. So I did feel like, okay, I'm not overdoing it because there were times I'm like, am I overdoing it or am I okay? So, and another guide was I'm talking, all along with my pacer and not having any difficulty talking. So this must be, a pretty easy pace for me. So.
Completely. And on the same vein of self-care, like what was your blister situation like? Did you deal with them? Did you have to navigate them? Were they even a factor?
I have one teeny tiny blister on my left foot that it developed, I think, the last day. But I never
How
felt
did you do
I
it?
didn't notice it until I finished. Like when I took my shoes off, I'm like, oh, I got a blister. So it wasn't anything of a problem. So that
Did you have
wasn't.
any like pre-run routine, or how did you set your feet up for success?
Well, we've talked in previous email or previous podcasts, I'm the soft approach. I put lotion on my feet every night. I don't, I typically do not have a blister issue, so it's not something that I really think about too much.
Hmm.
I do usually for this and for like hundreds, I will put squirrel's nut butter on my feet before I start just as a precautionary, but I just typically not an issue for me. So my feet. Actually, people commented how great my feet looked. Ooh, you've
Oh,
got
great. And I'm sure Dr. Liesel appreciates that. And she was working on your feet mid
yes,
FKT.
yes.
Maybe that's a lesson too. Take care of your feet out there, folks, because if you're asking for any help from a PT to help you down
That's
the trail,
right.
like you don't want to give them a bad situation.
And I'm smart about trimming my toenails, making sure everything on my feet are good, before I start something like that. But yeah. And then I have
I think
a few different
that's
shoes that I swapped, throughout the time too.
yeah. So those are two things that like I think are pretty important, and that might be my one tidbit of advice is like don't trim your toenails like the day or two before your event. Trim them the week prior to the event. Because if you clip a little piece of skin or whatever, like you don't want to worry about that and have that like in the back of your head, like,
Right,
for the entire race. But in 1 week, your nails aren't going to grow so long that it's going to
right.
be a problem anymore, right?
Yeah. And
So like
always
that's
paint
my
your
thing.
yeah, and always paint your toenails before the event because if you have to take your socks off, you want your toenails to look good.
I love that. I've never tried it, but I guess I'll try it for
You
the
should
next
try it.
one. um, my other thought was, oh, you know what? It's escaping me. Let's um let's move on to my other question.
Mhm.
So, sleep. What happened? What were you planning? And then we kind of talk about what happened, but kind of zoom out a little bit and tell us what you initially thought was going to happen with sleep and what actually happened.
Yeah, yeah. So my initial plan was to keep moving for the first 24 hours and then rest for 3 hours. I kind of had been monitoring my sleep cycle to kind of get an idea from using my Garmin and from naps that I take, like how long is a sleep cycle. And so I decided that I would go through 2 sleep cycles. So that was going to be about 3 hours was my plan. And I ended up stopping 3 hours short of 24 hours. And I did nap for about 3 hours because that's when I naturally woke up. Because I had told everybody, like, don't wake me up if I'm sleeping. I probably need to sleep. I don't need an alarm. I'll wake up because that's just my body. I wake up every, few hours. So I wasn't too worried about oversleeping and I didn't. So I woke up within 3 hours and that's was the plan the whole time. And that's pretty much how it went the whole way was I didn't have to really like monitor waking up. It just automatically happened. So it was probably a good amount of sleep for me because I did get through a couple sleep cycles. I woke up, I felt refreshed. I'm sure the PEMF had something to do with that. It does give you some energy from the magnets. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. So you pretty much executed the way that you thought you were going to execute your sleep strategy.
Yep. Yeah.
In hindsight, do you think that was the best strategy, or what would you change about it if you were to say
Yeah.
start another one next year?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not going back across the state if you want to know that. I've already been asked. Once it's good, I would have stopped sooner. I would have stopped in Marshall at 81 miles. I think that that could have been a big help for me. And I know I could have probably moved through faster had I stopped when I was feeling really good until despite getting too cold. That I think that was detrimental on my body. So that would be one thing definitely that I would change. But the other times I feel like it went pretty well. There were times I was forced to sleep earlier than I expected because, I decided to stop sooner than I expected. But then I'm like, I think it worked out because I got a nice reset and then I was ready, to go again. So yeah, I mean, and this was my first multi-day, so I didn't know what to expect, and I love sleep. So I was a little worried about that piece. Like I was worried about not wanting to get out in the cold after I was sleeping. You know what I mean? Like, because I like sleep and I thought, oh, it's going to be too short. And then I'm not going to want to get outside because it's going to be chilly. But I never felt that. I woke up and I always had energy and was like ready to go. And that was something that was interesting to me the entire time. I always had a ton of energy. There were moments when I would need food. And as soon as I got food, I was, great again. But for the most part, I was I, I had high energy, which was told me I was eating well. I was being smart about how fast I was moving. You know what I mean? Everything kind of flowed. I feel like things flowed better than I could have expected. I don't know if I could do it again as well.
So now, like backing up. So we talked about the effort, backing up into the training component. What was your overarching design in training? How did you prepare for the most? Because it sounds like, you did a really good job. Well, I mean, we always talk about on the podcast about like fueling the training, right, for the event that we're gonna be doing. How did you structure like some of your long runs leading up to the event?
hmm So, to be honest, I didn't make the commitment to this event until about 4 to 6 weeks out of the date. I had been preparing myself to be ready for a event in the fall, either a 24-hour or a 100 mile. So my training followed what I, typically would. However, this year I would had the opportunity to spend like a month out in Colorado, so I had a lot more zone one work, climbing mountains, on trails. I think that that was probably a really good opportunity because I was getting a lot of time on feet. My hours of training really increased when I was there because I was just hiking and running frequently. So I think that time on feet was really good. But then, and of course, I also am, incorporating speed work. And I think the other big thing for me was strength. So um, I've done strength for a long time, but this last year I really dedicated myself to focusing on strength training, making sure I was lifting heavy enough and not slacking on the amount that I was lifting, and being really consistent with my strength training. And I believe that was like huge key into my success of this race and feeling so good the entire time. So that was a big part. But a few weeks out, I even, pulled in your expert advice, like where should we go? Where should I go as far as peaking my mileage out, my long runs, and how should that look? And how should like a training camp look? So I did a 3 day, training camp, which I've not done before because I've never done anything, quite this long. So I started out probably 6 weeks out, maybe. I'm gonna say maybe it was 5 weeks that I did the training camp. And I did my first day was a long tempo a long run with tempo included in it, and then followed that up with some power hiking. So that actually ended up being an evening run, not by design, but just by what happened in the schedule. But it was a good way to start me out a little bit tired for day two, because I had less than 12 hours rest and it was time for day two. And on day two, I started off with a couple hours of power hiking, and I was being very purposeful of keeping my pace close to like 15-minute walk, power hiking pace. I got short legs, so that's fast for me. And then I followed that up with 3 hours of running. And I decided on that day to incorporate the 3-1 just to see what that felt like for me and see if that was something that I could use. And that's where I discovered I needed to be really careful of not going too fast in that intervals. So I did that. That ended up being about a 5 hour day. And each day I felt, pretty good. Then after that, the next day, I did another 3 hour long run. So that was my probably my biggest amount of my training block of that back to back to back. The following week, I kind of backed it up with a 2 day where I also got in about 5 hours one day, 3 hours the next, but I incorporated a heavy strength session the first day. So then the next day, again, I had a little bit more fatigue. And so those were probably the big things I would say that I changed that I haven't, wouldn't typically do as I was going into a hundred. Um, what was interesting to me, one, is that how quickly my body bounced back every day, that my body was able to handle all of, the moving, and that I never had muscle fatigue. I never felt tired as far as, my legs or my arms or my core, everything was strong the entire time, which I was pretty excited about that. I believe that the strength training played a huge part in that, to be able to, hold me together so well for so many miles.
Completely. And, just thinking back to, I mean, it feels like forever ago now, when we were talking about like what do we do for that long run, like, or for that training camp. Like, I remember having the conversation of, as a coach, it is so hard to give somebody the experience of what it feels like to
Yes.
be 80% of the way through a 100-mile race without actually running to 80 miles or running
Right.
through an entire 100. And
Yep.
that's the hardest thing about, especially when it's your first time at the distance, is you don't know what your body's going to feel like. You don't know how heavy your body is going to be. It is like dipping into the unknown. So you have to be open for everything, but you've been to 100, right? Like, so it's really hard in training to make it feel like it does at
Yes.
mile 80.
Yep.
So now to extrapolate that and say, how the heck do we get our body to feel like we're 200 miles in, knowing we have around 50 miles left to go, a little bit
Mhm.
less than? So what I was originally thinking was, man, I know that I've had some strength training routines where I do it on like a Friday and then I wake up Saturday and I go for a run and I'm like, my body just feels heavy. And
Mhm.
even easy paces on the heart rate, sometimes it's just hard to get your legs turning over at that speed. And I think it was really smart to incorporate like 6 weeks out because it gives you enough time to recover, right? Like
Right.
if you were to do that 2 or 4 weeks out, like you're kind of playing with fire with like, hey, is my body actually going to be able to see adaptation from this stimulus?
Right.
But doing it so far out, you were able to like get in that strength component, get in that time on your feet, but also feeling that heaviness after the strength and after a little bit of like quicker running on the front end for like upper aerobic gains. But then also just being able to transition and say mentally, like, I can move through a heavy body, you
Right,
know?
right. Yep.
So like mentally, physically, I think that was a great way to structure it out. And I think too that more people, if they were to incorporate strength training in a particular way like that, like before a long race, it at least gives you a little bit of an opportunity to understand what it feels like to keep moving when you're really heavy, because that impact of running like is definitely different than the muscular like fatigue that you'll get from strength training. So
Right.
combining the two gives you this really interesting view of like, oh yeah, I just did a long run with a little bit of tempo and I did strength work afterwards, and now we're all the way on day 2 or day 3, you know, and I have to hold pace and I have another long run. How do I mentally get through it? What does my body feel like after it's been impacted into the ground and the muscles have been maximally used?
Right. And that is typically how I will train with my strength is long run day is usually a heavy strength day. So I follow it up. So, it can impact your strength training, right? Because you already went out and ran, 20 or 30 miles. And then, you're already a bit fatigued and then you're coming back and then you're doing a hard session. So you might not PR in the strength training at that point, but my focus is running. Of course, I want strength as my ancillary to make me strong so I can stay injury free and, have all the benefits of strength training. But, the focus for me is still running because that's my sport, right? So I often do that and then back that up with not as long of a long run. I don't do a ton of back to back long runs, I would say. So yeah, so that was
Mm-hmm.
a good stimulus for me to get that back to back to back. And it's just mentally fatiguing too, knowing you have to go back out one more day, one more day, one more, so
Mm-hmm. And it gives you a little bit of recovery too, which is going to like drastically reduce your injury risk, right? Because we
right,
want to save like the performance for the day of or for the
right.
FKT and not
Yep,
necessarily like make the injury risk so high during training that you're compromising your ability to even start. So I think that's
right,
like a great way. And that's a great timeline too, like 6 to 8 weeks out from a big event, having something like that where it's like, I oftentimes when I'm planning it for athletes, I call it the dress rehearsal, right? Because we're going to
right,
put all of our gear on. We're going to think like we're actually performing. We're gonna like this is like as close to the race as we're gonna get, or as close to FKT as we're gonna get without actually like doing it, you know.
right, right.
So having those like dress rehearsals that far out is great. I think that was a great move for you.
Yeah. And my longest training run would have been probably a 5 hour run. I didn't do any longer than I would normally do for 100. So I think that's another thing to think about, when we're going into these 200s. But do we need to double our long runs to 10 hours? No, I don't think we do. I think that 5 hours was plenty enough for what I needed. And, I'm also a very consistent runner. So there's a lot to that too with cumulative fatigue versus, really building a really long run. I just feel that there's always that risk versus reward of going too far and then becoming, having some injury issues. So, and I knew going in, I already had a significant amount of miles for the year. So I was ready to perform an event, whatever I chose.
Yeah, totally. That cumulative piece is huge too. I'm actually talking with a couple athletes right now where it's like, we're going to pull back on the long runs, we're going to pull back on the speed training, but we're going to increase volume just by increasing frequency during the week. And you're not going to be as injury prone because you're not doing a 2 or 3 mile run and then doing a 20 miler on the weekends to get to your 30 miles a week, you know? So that frequency piece is dynamite. But coach, so we mentioned you're not going to be running across the state
Not,
next
not
year,
again.
or probably in the foreseeable future. But what
Right.
is coming up for you? Do you have your eyes on anything for 2025?
Well, I don't have anything that I'm actually committed to. I am on the wait list for Desert Solstice, but that's in a month. So that I might be rethinking that. I'll just to see kind of how my recovery is going. I did end with a little bit of inflammation still in my ankle that I'm working out. It appears that I might have had a little bit of cellulitis that developed probably from the running. Just the constant friction of my tendons probably riled up some stuff in there. So just kind of chilling right now. I one of the things that I learned is that I think I kind of love multi-day. Maybe I would be interested in doing a stage race. I think it was pretty fun. I mean, maybe I was spoiled because I had the most amazing possible crew that I could, across the state. I just had so much support. I couldn't ask for better support, so maybe that's why I liked it so much. It felt like the entire weekend was a one after another long run with friends all weekend long. I mean, who wouldn't love doing that all weekend long? I got to just run and run with new people all the time.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I'm so happy for you. I'm so glad it turned out well. I'm so glad, as you said, you came out relatively unscathed. I think in the grand scheme of things, if a little bit of inflammation and crankiness is all you're dealing with,
For
I think
sure.
that's about as good as it gets for ambitions like this. Is there anything else that you want to mention to the audience before we jet here?
I guess just that I have applied to FKT to get it all finalized. It's not completely official yet, but hopefully in the next day or so it will be an official, and I should have the overall record across the state. The previous ones were the male was 6 days, 7 hours and some change, and the female was I'm sorry, the female was 6 days, 7 hours and some change, and the male was 5 days, 7 hours and some change, and mine was 3 hours or 3 days and 15 hours. So yeah, so I should have that, no problem, which is super exciting. I think that, if you have something cool that you want to do, I've been wanting to do this since 2020. It's been on my mind. I kind of think sometimes those big goals like that you really want and you've been waiting on sometimes are the best ones that really play out well because you've like, I guess it's part of you, right? You've been thinking about it, and you just know that you can do it. And it just makes it all the more fun because now you're actually living the moment that you wanted to for, a bit of time. Sometimes I think if I jump into a race too soon, maybe I just haven't given it enough thought, mental preparation, and then maybe it doesn't go as well as I hoped because I just didn't have time to give it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I almost think and I've actually been thinking about that too, is time to internalize it,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes. Perfect
to take
words.
this
Yeah.
race, this inanimate thing, and make it a part of you, so that way you can draw upon that why, as it's just kind of like interwoven into your fabric at that point. It takes time to develop that relationship, just like any.
Right, absolutely. So yeah, so thanks for talking about it. It was absolutely amazing journey. I do have a blog written up on ultracrazyrunner.com that you can also check out and lots of stuff on my sorry, my phone is overtaking me again. I don't know. Um
Always Zoom.
lots of stuff
Thanks
on
for the
my
update,
social media too.
Zoom.
So yeah. All right, I'm almost back. Sorry about that.
That's all right. That's fine. Well, thank you so much again for logging on and giving us all of the good details. You were just mentioning your blog, ultracrazyrunner.com. Go check it out. Go share it with anybody that you think might benefit from the journey, from the tips, and definitely share it too because like it is your FKT, but we're all in it for everybody's success.
Right, absolutely. And one last thing I just want to say is I reached out to both previous record holders before I started the journey to get any suggestions, tips from them, and then to let them know I was, the courtesy of I was going for the record. And they were super, super friendly. They had both hoped to come out and join me part of the way, which would have been super cool, but timing just didn't work out for them. But that's one of the things I love about this community is that we're all supporting each other even if you are going for somebody else's record, we're all there together to wish each other well, and it's I think that's just really cool. So yeah.
Completely. Well, thank you so much. Take care. We'll see you next week.
Thanks. All right, bye.
Bye.